So the last time we were together in person at DIUC, we talked about data governance somewhat aspirationally in terms of how we think it should work. But 2 years later, we have a fair amount of customer experience from many implementation projects under our belts, and we're seeing some best practices emerge. So we wanted to share those with you. So one of the things that we discussed during the last user conference was this workflow that we had proposed around a practical way to implement data governance. And this is essentially what we've seen working with our customers in the field. And we try to facilitate this through a variety of different things that we do in our projects. For example, we typically start with the Measure Master tool, which keeps the focus on the measures and KPIs that the project is intended to produce in terms of the data that's used, the logic that's applied to that data, and then how the information is ultimately going to be used in the organization and how it's going to be interpreted. Because if you get that right, you're more likely to have a successful analytics initiative. We also incorporate that information directly into our analytics application in the form of the Measure Dictionary, in other tools that expose the metadata, the descriptive data around measures and KPIs, the things, the quantitative information that tend to be the focus of these applications. So we wanted to share some of the things that we've seen work effectively in projects. And to do that, I've asked Julie Lamoureux to join me. Hi, Julie.
Hi, George.
So Julie is a project manager and subject matter expert on our consulting team, and she works closely with customers to implement analytics applications, and she is intimately involved in governance initiatives. So Julie, let's talk a little bit about best practices. So here's a list that we made together. Can you give us a little bit of background and insight to each of these?
Yes, thank you, George. The best practice for governance is definitely, the first point is definitely to involve the stakeholders. Everybody who will be using those measures need to be involved from the beginning, from a definition point and from a use point of view. You need subject matter expert, both the subject matter expert, the clinical ones or the operational ones, and the ones that are familiar with the database where the information is located. And you also have to assign accountability. Some measures need to be updated regularly, and one person or one group of people should be responsible for those upgrades.
And we know that collecting feedback after an application is deployed is essential as well. And I understand you've been involved in an interesting innovation to capture that type of information.
Absolutely. Most of the governance committees do not involve a lot of end users. They involve a lot of subject matter experts. So one customer who had a very strong governance structure set up a feedback page for the end users or the consumer to be able to send feedback on, for example, is the measure appropriate? Has the measure, should the measure be retired? Should we add another measure? And that they found was a very good way to keep their governance alive.
Thanks, Julie. So a few things on what Dimensional Insight is doing to support governance in the future. So on the Diver platform side, we're continually improving Workbench to better support Measure Factory, and particularly the metadata that describes our key performance indicators and measures. We're looking at separating out that measure metadata from the factory configuration to make it a little bit more practical to produce and maintain it, and also looking at adding additional metadata tags for richer descriptions of measure data. On the application side, we're working to improve the Measure Dictionary, particularly around the ability to search for measure and measure-related information, and also enhancing our documentation and the ability for our customers to implement documentation within those measures. And as we've just been discussing with Julie, within our consulting organization, identifying best practices and transferring those amongst our customers. So hopefully this discussion around data governance was useful to you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.